BRICS is a different structure. It's a new organization based on the principles of equality, mutual respect, consensus, non-interference.
The enlargement of the BRICS will be beneficial to the BRICS countries, beneficial to developing countries.
It is therefore imperative that BRICS members demonstrate sincerity in regard to reforming global decision-making, including that of the UN Security Council. At the heart of the problems we face is economic concentration that leaves too many nations at the mercy of too few.
Brazil is also fully committed to strengthening our engagement with BRICS, which is an indispensable mechanism for building a multipolar world order that reflects the voices and needs of developing countries.
Does the EU have a rival? Is there a group of countries out there that have the same political and economic unity? These 5 countries make up BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And that is not all. At the start of this year, 5 more countries joined the BRICS group. These new members are Iran, Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia, Egypt, and the UAE.
تتمتع المملكة بصداقة قوية وعلاقات تجارية وشراكات استراتيجية مع كافة دول المجموعة، وتعتز المملكة بكونها أكبر شريك تجاري لمجموعة بريكس بمنطقة الشرق الأوسط.
With these countries joining, the group is now often referred to as BRICS Plus, meaning the BRICS group is getting bigger and more varied. Some believe BRICS hold the same, if not more, power than the European Union on the world stage. But is this true though? In this video, we'll first compare the original 5 BRICS countries with the EU. Then we will explore the new BRICS Plus members and potential future additions to the group. In 2001, Jim O'Neill, an economist working at Goldman Sachs, wrote a report detailing how he believed Brazil, India, Russia, and China would grow to dominate the world economy in as little as 50 years. He called this grouping of countries BRIC, an acronym of each country's initials.
I think the 4 BRIC countries in the next 30 years will be the 4 largest so-called emerging economies. And even while there are other emerging economies that are interesting and exciting, including the so-called mint countries, it's very unlikely that any of them are going to be as big as any of the BRIC countries.
By 2010, South Africa, also seen as a developing economy, joined the group, thereby adding the final initial S to form the word BRICS.
Our BRICS partners are now the largest trading partners of both Africa and South Africa. They realize the exponential growth potential of our regional market.
Since 2010, the leaders of the 5 countries have been holding annual summits where they discuss world affairs and set out future plans for political and financial cooperation. The BRICS want to offer an alternative to the traditional Western world order, led by the United States and the European Union. Many have since wondered, is BRICS a more powerful force than the EU? Is this grouping of countries something Europe should worry about? In our opinion, no. In their current form, the BRICS and the EU are 2 completely different organizations. We'll look at 3 pillars today and explain why we think the EU is still a much more integrated and influential group compared to BRICS on the international stage. But of course, this might change in the future. The first pillar is geography. Let's take a look back at our map. In yellow are the member states of the European Union. In green are the original 5 BRICS countries. Yes, I know that there are 10 BRICS countries, but we want to start off with the original 5. Towards the end of the video, we will show you a full comparison of the EU versus the BRICS and versus the BRICS Plus. So bear with us, as it's quite amazing how fast this group is growing. At first glance, it looks like the original 5 BRICS countries already have the clear upper hand. Altogether, BRICS countries have a combined landmass of nearly 40 million square kilometers, stretching across most continents, which covers just over a quarter of the planet's land surface. Compare this to the EU, whose borders only cover just over 4 million square kilometers on just one continent. Not only that, the original BRICS countries hold over 3.3 billion people within their borders, which is around 42% of the world's population. The EU population is large with over 440 million residents, but it still pales in comparison to this giant number. Finally, in terms of natural resources, BRICS win again. Russia is home to large natural gas reserves, Brazil has access to the Amazon rainforest, and China holds key rare earth reserves on its land. So, the BRICS countries win, right? Case closed. Well, not quite. Even though these countries are large, they're very spread out. In comparison, the EU member states are very close together. Moving goods from Spain to France can be done in a single day, and a holiday trip from Brussels to Rome is only a short 2-hour Ryanair flight. Even the longest trip across the EU, from Lisbon to Nicosia in Cyprus, is only around 7 hours. For BRICS countries, it's a completely different story. China and Russia share a border, but Moscow is almost over 5,700 kilometers away from Beijing. Brazil is locked in the southern hemisphere, far away from either of the three in Asia, while South Africa is tucked away at the very bottom of the African continent. Therefore, shipping and travel take far longer compared to their EU counterparts. Not only that, the EU has an ace up its sleeve: the single market and Schengen area. This means that European countries who are part of it can move their goods, capital, and people freely across borders. Not only is the journey between Brazil and India longer, but you also have to go through much more paperwork once you finally do arrive. There are advantages and disadvantages to both sides, but we believe sharing tight land borders and movement agreements make for a stronger overall union. Let's take a look at the economic powers of both groups too. Here we do not want to mince our words. When you tally them together, the original 5 BRICS economies far outshine the EU economy. The total BRICS GDP is a staggering $25.9 trillion, putting it far ahead of the EU's $16.7 trillion. The BRICS economies also tend to be faster growing, with India shooting ahead with a very healthy 6.3% annual growth rate, and Brazil enjoying a steady but decelerating 3% average growth rate. In the EU, growth is much slower. Even the fastest growing economies are only seeing average increases of around 2% to 2.5%, except for the Republic of Ireland, who's growing at a 5.6% rate this year. You go, Ireland. But again, numbers don't tell the whole story. For one, when you take a look at the BRICS economies side by side, you see that it's incredibly unbalanced. China, with a GDP worth $18 trillion, accounts for well over half of the BRICS economies. South Africa, on the other hand, looks tiny with its $400 billion. Russia, supposedly one of the great international powers, has a similar GDP as Italy, though this is to be expected, partly due to the heavy sanctions the country has been facing from the Western Bloc due to their invasion of Ukraine. In the EU, the spread is more balanced. Of course, large countries like France, Germany, Italy, and Spain dominate, but Eastern Europe is quickly catching up. The EU budget also means that many of the economies falling behind get more EU money, thereby allowing them to grow quicker. BRICS countries are simply on their own. And let's not forget the euro, which plays a crucial role in the EU's economic unity and strength. As a single currency shared by many of its member states, the euro facilitates seamless trade and economic stability within the EU, contrasting the varied currencies and monetary policies of the BRICS nations. The BRICS have talked about a common currency in the past, but so far, these discussions have not resulted in concrete action, highlighting a key difference in the level of economic integration between the EU and the BRICS. Finally, the BRICS countries rarely act as one body on the international stage. They usually sign their own trade agreements and set their own tariffs when dealing with third nations. The EU, on the other hand, has signed trade agreements with the United States, Japan, Australia, Argentina, and many more. All tariffs are set at the EU level, meaning the taxes paid on goods coming into France are the same paid on ones coming into Poland or Cyprus. But what about politics? Are the BRICS countries as close as their European counterparts? The political aspect is what truly sets apart the EU from the BRICS. The BRICS group is made up of largely independent members who each have wildly different economies, cultures, and geopolitical goals. Sometimes these countries even fight among themselves. For example, India and China are still locked in a heated dispute over the highly profitable Kashmir region.
I have made it very clear, frankly, publicly as well. India-China relations are not normal and cannot be normal if the peace and tranquility in the border areas is disturbed.
India also isn't entirely committed to defending their would-be allies. India has been relatively quiet about Russia's invasion of Ukraine and is now starting to turn away from purchasing their goods as price of Russian oil begins to rise. India has also reduced its defense purchases from Russia and is starting to buy more from the US, France, and Israel instead. Not only that, for the BRICS summit held in Johannesburg this year, Russian President Vladimir Putin was forced to attend via video call. South Africa is part of the International Criminal Court. Their authorities would have been forced to arrest Putin once he stepped onto South African soil. It's hardly a good look for an international organization when one member has to officially acknowledge another member's leader as a criminal. Nonetheless, the BRICS are growing fast. In January, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia, Egypt, and the UAE joined the BRICS group, now often referred to as BRICS+. And there are even more applicants. A total of 14 countries are currently on the waiting list, many of whom are expected to join in the next expansion round. So what does this mean? Let's first compare the original BRICS group to the BRICS+ group. In terms of geography, demographics, and economy, all key metrics have gone up significantly. For example, GDP has increased from 25.9 trillion to 28.6 trillion, a more than 10% increase. And if we compare this against the EU, the difference becomes even more stark. This will mean more relevance for the BRICS on the world stage, but also more opportunities for division. The EU member states have their differences, sure, but there's much more political cohesion overall. The unified response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine was far stronger than many expected. The EU often acts as one single bloc on the world stage, yet it has to be said that disagreements over foreign policy are still very common. The EU is a supranational organization, meaning that each member state has given up some degree of autonomy and sovereignty so that it can have more power. The European Parliament and the European Commission have powerful international presences, with world leaders such as Zelensky and Biden visiting the parliament to give speeches. BRICS is an international organization. BRICS has no power on its own, as the members retain full sovereignty. The organization simply acts as a platform for the leaders to discuss world affairs and to potentially cooperate. In fact, BRICS is so divided, it might be more relevant to compare to the G7, a collection of the 7 leading world economies behind the international liberal world order. This would be bad news for BRICS supporters, as the inclusion of economic giants like the United States, the UK, and Japan means that the G7 total GDP at over $51 trillion dwarfs the BRICS countries. At EU Made Simple, we like initiatives that promote international cooperation. However, BRICS+ is fundamentally different from the EU. In fact, the BRICS+ may never be like the EU or NATO, but the key question is, do they need to be? Despite its advantages, the EU grapples with issues like democratic shortcomings and conflicts between national sovereignty and deeper integration. It even experienced a member state's departure only a few years ago. NATO also faces criticism for its expansionist approach and questions about its current relevance. BRICS+, meanwhile, identifies as an informal group of states, concentrating on the needs of emerging economies. Their priorities include fostering international trade, promoting inclusive decision-making globally, and providing alternatives for countries facing sanctions, such as Russia and Iran. The BRICS+ group offers a different approach to the EU, yet it's not opposed to the West. Brazilian President Lula da Silva emphasized this during the last summit's opening, stating we do not want to be a counterpoint to the G7, G20, or the United States. We just want to organize ourselves. It's crucial for the EU to engage more with BRICS nations, fostering equality in global institutions like the IMF and the World Bank, and involving them more in global decision-making. Without such engagement, their current stance towards the West may turn sour. But do you agree with our analysis? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and please subscribe if you enjoyed the content. And if you want to support us further, please sign up to Patreon. Until next time.